The Revolutionary War by Josh Gregory, bringing history to life. Setting the scene, a new start in North America. The colonies expanded quickly as business found success in the new continent. In the early 17th century, English colonists began settling in North America. Most came to find land and work. They hoped to become successful and wealthy. One of their goals was to expand westward, where land and opportunities were plentiful. Slavery was legal in America at the time. It played an important role in the growth of the colonies, especially in the South. By the mid-18th century, the settlers had established the 13 colonies along North America's Atlantic coast. The colonists were British. They were subjects of Great Britain under the king. Colonists were expected to follow the laws Parliament made in England. In 1754, war broke out between France and Great Britain for control of North America. Both sides have Native American allies. The American colonists fought alongside Great Britain. Great Britain won the conflict, known both as the French and Indian War and the 7 Years' War. The victory cost Britain huge sums of money and created the problem of having to govern and protect new lands they won from France. The French and Indian War was a long and bloody conflict. Chapter 1, Seeds of Rebellion. The British military protected the colonies from Native American attacks along the western frontier. British had to quickly decide how to govern the new land. Colonists were eager to expand westward, but all the land west of the colonies was Indian territory. Violence between Native Americans and British troops and colonists often occurred along the western edges of the colonies. Colonists clashed with Native Americans as they attempted to expand westward. The Proclamation of 1763. Great Britain issued the Proclamation of 1763. The proclamation prevented colonists from settling on Indian land. It also ordered that any colonists currently living on Indian land had to return to colonial soil. All land west of the Appalachian Mountains was proclaimed to be Indian territory. These boundaries were established to halt the flow of American settlers to the west until Britain could set up a new form of government for the recently acquired lands. Many colonists were unhappy with Britain's decision to limit the movements. They believed Britain did not have the right to sovereignty in North America. Too many taxes. To pay off its war debt, Great Britain began taxing the American colonies to raise money. The colonists believed the British did not have this right. Great Britain argued that it did hold this sovereign right in American colonies. Britain had imposed taxes throughout all of its colonial holdings. It assumed it could do so in its American colonies. In 1764, Parliament issued the Plantation Act, also known as the Sugar Act. This act placed a high duty on sugar and molasses imported from non-British merchants. The colonists would be forced to purchase all of their sugar and molasses from the British merchants. In 1765, Parliament issued the Stamp Act. Although Stamp Acts were common in Britain, it angered colonists. The act placed a tax on almost all printed papers, including newspapers, legal documents, and certain kinds of books. These papers could not be issued or sold without special stamps purchased from the British government. Think about this. The British are being really strict with the colonists. These taxes must have cost the colonists a fortune and must have limited them on their day-to-day activities. What do you think? Take a second to jot that down in your reader's notebook and just put in some thoughts about what you would think about all those taxes. Colonists had no voice in Britain's government because they were not allowed to vote in the British elections. They argued it was unfair for them to be taxed without representation. Many colonists refused to pay for stamps. Others burned stamps, rioted, and threatened British workers in charge of selling the stamps. Colonial merchants began refusing to purchase goods from British merchants. British merchants protested to Parliament that the Stamp Act was harming their businesses. In 1766, Parliament repealed the tax, but it issued a new act on the same day. The Declaratory Act stated that the British government had the power to tax and make laws for the colonies whenever and however it wished. In 1767, Parliament issued new acts, placing duties on imported goods such as glass, paper, and tea. These acts and several others were known as the Townshend Acts. British officers soon were stationed at colonial ports to make sure the duties were paid. Colonists began smuggling goods such as tea into the country so they would not have to pay duties. The Boston Massacre. In 1768, 4,000 British troops were sent to Boston, Massachusetts. Tensions grew between the colonists and the soldiers. On March 5, 1770, a barber's apprentice named Edward Garrick was sent to collect payment owed by a British officer. When Garrick arrived at the British offices, a guard refused to let him in. The two began arguing and soon drew the attention of nearby colonists. Why is the British Parliament imposing so many laws and taxes? The Boston Massacre was seen as a brutal attack by many colonists. The colonists joined in the argument and dared the guard to shoot at them. More British soldiers arrived and tried to break up the growing crowd. The colonists menaced the soldiers and hurled objects at them. One of the British soldiers heard someone yell, "Fire!" The confused soldier raised his gun and pulled the trigger, thinking that his captain had shouted the order. Other soldiers heard the shot and began firing their weapons as well. 5 people were killed and 9 others were injured. Hopefully, you're enjoying where this is going. A lot of conflict, a lot of questions to be answered. This is just the beginning. Make sure that you've read through the PowerPoint and that you are working on your reader's notebook and that you're working on the graphic organizers, answering the questions and making the comments so that we know that you're participating. We miss you all, wonderful children, and we will talk to you and see you soon.